The information shared on Light Body Radio is for educational and informational purposes only. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed healthcare provider, or qualified wellness practitioner with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or health goal. Dr. Lara May, her guests, and affiliates do not claim to cure, prevent, or treat any condition and are not responsible for any actions taken based on the information shared in this podcast. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that you are responsible for your own health decisions and that any actions you take based on the content are at your own discretion and risk. Thank you for tuning in to Light Body Radio.
Welcome to Light Body Radio, where science meets soul and healing gets multidimensional. I am your host, Dr. Lara May, functional medicine pharmacist, master intuitive Reiki channel, and certified life and health coach. Here we decode root causes, transmute stuck energy, and empower your full spectrum healing journey, body, mind, and light body. This isn't just wellness, it's awakening, grounded in science, guided by spirit, and designed for your evolution. Let's rise and radiate. Welcome to the next level of you. Hello and welcome to Light Body Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Lara May, and today we're going to be talking about peptides. So this is our third episode in this series, all about peptides, what you need to know, and all the little tidbits that you might not be getting from other influencers, practitioners, whatever title you want to give them out there. So today we're going to be talking about, this is again like part of our foundational series, like what makes them work and maybe what prevents them from providing you the results that you're looking for. So if you've been exploring peptides, or maybe you've already tried them and you didn't get the results you expected, or the results didn't last, or something just felt off, or whatever, you weren't satisfied, then this episode is definitely for you, because today we're talking about something that is almost completely missing from the whole conversation, in my personal opinion. And that is that peptides don't override dysfunction. They actually depend on your body's responsiveness already being intact. So if the body isn't in a state where it can receive and respond to signals in a healthy way, then even the most well-chosen and well-designed peptide regimen can fall flat, can fail, can just have not the results that you want. And it's not because the peptides themselves don't work. It's because the environment that they're entering into, your body, isn't quite ready yet. So let's get clear. When someone says, oh, I tried peptides, they didn't work for me, what that usually means is that the signals were delivered, but the cell couldn't respond appropriately. And that comes down to a few key pieces in our cellular physiology, which I think it's even important for lay people to know and understand. So the first thing are our receptors. Peptides work by binding to receptors on the surface of the cell. So it's like a lock and key mechanism. But receptors are not static. So they can become down-regulated, which means there might be fewer available. They can become desensitized, which means they're less responsive to signaling, or they can be functionally impaired due to inflammation or metabolic dysfunction. And this oftentimes happens with chronic stress, insulin resistance, and a variety of inflammatory signaling. So even if the peptide is present, the door it's trying to knock on is either closed or just not answering the door, not responding. So another aspect or facet can be ATP. And again, ATP is the energy that comes from our mitochondria. That's our cellular energy. That is really what our body functions on at the root, at the core. That's, all the food that you eat essentially is broken down to be used by the cell in the form of ATP. So every signaling cascade inside the body requires energy. When a peptide binds to a receptor and initiates a series of intracellular events, meaning events that are happening inside the cell. So what does that entail? That's enzyme activation, that's gene expression, that's protein synthesis, and repair pathways. And all of that requires ATP. So if the mitochondrial function is impaired, again, because your mitochondria make the ATP, then what we'll see, or how the mitochondria become impaired, maybe is a better way to say it, is due to chronic stress, toxin exposure, nutrient deficiencies, metabolic dysfunction. All of this stuff can get in the way of appropriate and adequate ATP production. And so I'm sure if you've listened to this show for a long time, or if you've worked with another functional medicine practitioner, then usually they're testing for nutrient deficiencies and like other toxic burden load and all these things. And the reason that we're doing that is because we're trying to figure out where the pathways are broken down in your body and where we need to focus on replenishing and restoring those. So if ATP is low, the cell may receive the signal, but it cannot carry out the response. It cannot provide the energy for the response. So it's like receiving a text message with instructions, but your phone battery is about to die. It's only at 1%. And so you might not even have time to read all the instructions before the phone shuts off. So the third is signal competition and interference. So the body is constantly processing multiple signals at once: hormones, cytokines, neurotransmitters, metabolic cues. If the system is overwhelmed, especially by stress hormones or inflammatory cytokines, those signals can override or distort the peptide signal altogether. So what you get is oftentimes either no response, or it's a blunted response, or inconsistent. Like sometimes you feel great, sometimes you don't feel any different at all, like the same level of crappiness, or just an inefficient response. Like you might feel a little bit different or better, but not as good as you were hoping to feel. And so this is why two different people can take the exact same regimen and have completely different outcomes depending on their own biology and physiology. So let's also look at the nervous system and the HPA axis regulation, because this is really one of our foundational physiological processes that our body needs to be functioning in a healthy way. Number one, for us to feel good, but then also so that the peptides can function appropriately to help us get back into a state of homeostasis. So let's go upstream, so to speak, the nervous system. So specifically the balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic, and the function of the HPA axis itself. So the HPA axis stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and it is your body's central stress response system. It regulates cortisol production, your circadian rhythm, and how your body is able to adapt to stress or not. So in a healthy system, your cortisol rises in the morning. That's what gets your body awake and moving and going. And then it gradually declines throughout the day. And this allows for rest and repair at night. With chronic stress, what we often see are various forms of dysregulation. Some people can have elevated cortisol all day, meaning you spike in the morning and it never goes down. A lot of other people can have flattened cortisol patterns, meaning you never get the spike and it just stays at this low indolent level, not really producing much at all. Or you can also have, a completely dysregulated system where you have the spike in the morning and then it goes down. And then some people have that spike later on in the afternoon. Oftentimes, if you feel that tired but wired feeling either late in the day, sometimes even like right before bed, that is a classic illustration of cortisol dysregulation. And so this impacts everything. It impacts your immune function, your metabolism, your hormone balance, your cellular signaling. And we've talked about this before, but I'll just gently say it again. The cortisol also drives your insulin resistance and or your optimal insulin pathways, those metabolic pathways. So if your cortisol is dysregulated, then you can almost be guaranteed for sure that your insulin and your metabolic pathways are also being dysregulated because of how closely they work together in the body. So now let's talk about the parasympathetic. So the parasympathetic nervous system is your rest, digest, and repair system. It governs digestion, nutrient absorption, tissue repair, immune modulation, vagal tone, and inflammatory control. So when the parasympathetic tone is low, which is extremely common in high-performing, chronically stressed individuals, then the body spends very little time in true repair state. And so even if you introduce a peptide that says repair this tissue, reduce this inflammation, restore this function, the body may not respond because it's still operating in that survival mode, that fight or flight mode. And so from a physiological standpoint, oftentimes blood flow can be redirected to different places, meaning not in the place that you need the repair, especially let's say like you've even just had, like soft tissue injury, whether it's an ankle or a knee or something. You need that blood flow there to bring the healing molecules there. But if your body's in fight or flight, then it's going to be focused on your core organs, not going to your extremities to heal that acute injury. It also, your inflammatory pathways can remain elevated, again, just because they get in this cycle of overexcitation. And receptor sensitivity can be also altered by chronic cortisol exposure. When your cortisol is elevated, also your insulin resistance is elevated. And when we have insulin resistance, that means that our body's not as sensitive to insulin itself, right? And so this is why our nervous system regulation is super important. And if it's not optimal, it's going to have a lot of downstream effects throughout the rest of our body. So it really is that ultimate prerequisite for the responsiveness, the ideal responsiveness that we're looking for, both from our body and from any peptides that you may be investigating or looking into for yourself. So the second piece of this foundation that I want to talk to you about today is metabolic health. And we already talked a lot about it a little, but let's dive deeper into that. So this is one of the most underappreciated factors in peptide responsiveness. And so first, let's, of course, dive into insulin resistance. In a healthy system, insulin binds to receptors and allows glucose to enter the cell where it can be used to produce ATP. In insulin resistance, though, the receptors become less sensitive, glucose remains elevated in the bloodstream, and cells are essentially underfueled. And so you have this paradox where your body is still pumping out the insulin, releasing glucose into the bloodstream, into the body for utilization, but your cellular energy is low because it's not getting utilized. And so you have high blood sugar and low cellular energy. And at the same time, that elevated insulin is driving inflammation. It's increasing oxidative stress and it's disrupting other signaling pathways. And so this is why when you have diabetes, this is how you get the neuropathy. You have the damage to your eyesight and your kidneys and all of these other downstream effects that are very real and very real consequences in uncontrolled diabetes. So from a receptor standpoint, insulin resistance is not just about glucose. It is global receptor signaling, which means peptide signaling is also less efficient if you have this core metabolic imbalance and inflammation. Other factors that come into play here are mitochondrial function declines, again, because they're underfed. They're not getting that glucose that they need, so they can't make the ATP. There is an increase in reactive oxygen species, so your body is more acidic and you have more free radicals floating around, which are inflammatory and damaging. So, and then again, like we've said already before, that ATP production becomes impaired. So you can deliver a precise signal, but if the metabolic environment is unstable, then the response will not be optimal. And this is why metabolic health is not just about weight loss. Weight loss is actually just a happy coincidence and it's reflective of our metabolism coming back into tune when our body is finally comfortable and healthy enough to release the weight. So this is again about fueling the cell so it can respond to the signals in a healthy, predictable way that we want. Okay, so foundation number 3, inflammation, cytokines, and signal distortion. So now we're going to go a little bit deeper into the inflammatory pathways. So when we talk about chronic inflammation, we're often referring to elevated inflammatory cytokines. They are different types of cells. So if you've ever heard of TNF alpha, IL-6, IL-1 beta, these molecules are part of our immune response. So they are supposed to be there, and they are supposed to be there in healthy amounts. But when they are chronically elevated, they can actually create systemic disruption. At the cellular level, inflammatory cytokines interfere with receptor signaling pathways. They alter gene expression, they increase oxidative stress, and they can impair mitochondrial function. And they can also activate pathways like NF-κB, which keeps the body in a pro-inflammatory state. So what this does functionally is actually just creates a whole bunch of signal noise and confusion in the body. And so you have a pathway that is completely normal and healthy in and of itself, but if it again gets overactive, if it's chronically overdoing it or overcompensating, then it actually becomes pro-inflammatory. So instead of clean, precise communication between cells, we get distortion, we get confusion. And so when a peptide comes in with a specific targeted message, that message has to compete with all the other background noise of this inflammatory signaling. And so what does that result in? That is where you find your reduced effectiveness, your slower response, or inconsistent outcomes. And so clinically, this often shows up in people with gut dysfunction, gut dysbiosis, or, permeability issues, SIBO, IBS, any of those types of things, you'll find this inconsistency. Autoimmune patterns, so whether it's hypothyroidism or adrenal fatigue or, any of the myriad of autoimmune dysfunction and issues out there. Chronic infection, so if you're chronically dealing with mold or maybe a tick-borne illness, or maybe it's even something like a chronic sinus infection, these can actually, that'll push your body sometimes into this chronic pro-inflammatory state. And then, of course, toxin exposure. So whether that is a biological or synthetic toxin that you're just continuously exposed to, then that also pushes your body into that pro-inflammatory state. So this is not about the peptide failing. It's about the environment interfering with the signal of that peptide. And so the last piece of these foundational aspects that I want to bring together is the sleep and recovery physiology. So let's talk about sleep. We talk about sleep a lot, but I don't think it can be emphasized enough, because this is where so much of our body's work actually happens, is when we're sleeping. So during sleep, growth hormone is released, tissue repair is increased, immune modulation occurs in a healthy, good way. The glymphatic detoxification in the brain is activated. And so if your sleep is disruptive, then your growth hormone signaling is impaired, your inflammation is increasing, your cortisol regulation becomes dysregulated, and your recovery capacity drops. So if you're not sleeping well, then it's not just about feeling tired when you wake up. Your body literally is not able to repair the inflammation that you experienced during the day. And that's what it's supposed to be able to do. You live your life, you go through your day, you have your ups and downs and all these different things you're exposed to. But The body is supposed to be able to compensate and repair while you're sleeping, while you're resting. And so from a cellular repair standpoint, the repair process is incomplete, energy production is compromised, and signaling pathways don't fully reset themselves, or they can actually be completely diverted into new pathways that might not be as healthy as the original ones. So when someone is using peptides for recovery, healing, or even just longevity, but not getting adequate deep restorative sleep, there is a disconnect, there's a mismatch, and there's going to be less effectiveness. Peptides can enhance repair, but they cannot replace the biological window where that repair occurs. I think that's really important to realize and to recognize here. So when we look at our body as a whole, which is what functional medicine does, we look at the whole body, the whole system, and we want to find where's that root cause of whatever issue that I'm looking to solve for myself. Then we have to look at all of this together: nervous system, metabolism, inflammation, sleep. And hopefully you started to see a pattern and how it's all connected here. So these peptides are not the driver of healing. They are ideally the amplifiers of what the body is already capable of, but is struggling to do on its own. If the system is stable, nourished, responsive, then peptides can accelerate outcomes in a really meaningful, healthy way. But if the system is dysregulated, they may underperform or provide, inconsistent results. And that's not failure. This is, again, just a reflection of physiology and biology. So what do we do instead? So I'm not saying don't even try, because I think that's just a defeatist way, I think, to look at health and healing and life in general. So, because none of us are perfect and we're all constantly working on improving something, right? And so what we need to do is we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We just become more strategic. So we start to ask questions. Is my nervous system regulated enough to allow repair? If not, how do I help my system get there? So that means that you'll do all the things that you need to do to regulate your nervous system and allow that repair, while also starting to introduce peptides, probably. So again, it's a hand-in-hand approach. It's not a one or an all or nothing approach, or an either or. It's a yes and approach. Is my metabolism stable enough to support cellular energy? It might not be on its own, but that's why we can introduce some peptides to help you get there, and you'll be optimizing along the way, getting healthier along the way, and then those peptides will be just getting more and more and more effective and efficient for you. Is inflammation in my body controlled enough for healthy, clear cellular signaling? Maybe, maybe not. But we need to ask these questions and be honest with ourselves and honest with our practitioners, and hopefully your practitioner is honest with you about where you are, in a non-judgmental but supportive way. And am I getting the sleep required for recovery? And depending on what your answer is to those previous questions, then we just build from there. We figure out where you are, where you need to focus on the most. Maybe all of those things need to be addressed, but we're not going to dive deep in the rabbit hole on all of those things all at once. That's overwhelming to the human brain. That would also be overwhelming to your body, and that also would create a cycle of not success, not optimal outcomes. So this is really where functional medicine shines, not in the trends and not in the stacking of protocols, but understanding the system and understanding the nuances of, okay, where do we start first? Which one of those questions of the four I just asked is the one that is standing or screaming the loudest, standing out the most or screaming the loudest about where your system is right now, versus where our goals are that we want to get with you and for you. And when we look at it that way, then we build our model towards homeostasis. So what are the lifestyle things we're going to change? Maybe it's the sleep schedule first thing right off. Maybe it's the detox pathways. Maybe we need to get you into a sauna. on a regular basis to help your body start to unload the toxic burden. Maybe we need to address those nutrient deficiencies that we tested for and we found in your blood work. Whatever it is, we are going to look at the whole picture and put together a stepwise strategic approach to help your body rebuild the system gently and over time. Because again, none of this is one size fits all. None of this is quick fix or overnight. There is no miracle pill or compound here. And in the coming episodes, we're going to get into some specific peptides. And I know everyone out there wants to know about the GLPs. We're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about the GLP 1, 2, and 3s and how they're different, why they're good, what can happen if you overdo it, all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But they're amazing. But again, they're not miracle cures. And they're also not meant to be a crutch or like a lifetime commitment. So if you've tried peptides and you didn't get the results you expected, this is not a dead end. This is just more data. It's more information. It's showing you where your system may need support first. And so if you're considering peptides, this is your opportunity to do it differently. Do it in a way that's physiologically sound, clinically grounded, and actually sustainable. And this is also what you need to look for in a practitioner. So if you're working with someone and they are, just protocol stacking over protocol stacking, then that actually, and you're not feeling better or you're not seeing the results that you want, that should be, red flags or alert signals. Like, okay, maybe this is not the practitioner for me. Maybe this isn't the approach for me. And so I just want you to be aware. I want you to be able to come into this with eyes wide open, with information in your arsenal, being comfortable asking questions. You should also feel comfortable asking your practitioner questions that maybe if you don't understand something, or if you hear the practitioner suggesting something and it seems a little too much. I do this all the time with my clients because these protocols can get complicated. When we talk about the testing and then what do we do with the testing results? Are we looking at supplements and we're looking at lifestyle changes? And then, maybe now we're adding on peptides. Maybe we're not, but maybe we're talking about it. It's like, oh gosh, well, what do I do and how do I keep up with it all? And it can be very overwhelming. So if you're a practitioner out there listening to this, then keep that in mind too. When you build a systemized based approach for your patients or protocol, whatever you want to call it, make sure it's of course approaching all the things and the nuances and the places that need to be repaired, but also in a way that's doable and sustainable for your client, for your patient. It's great if you come up with, you literally see all the holes and all the, chemical reactions in the body that are broken down and not working right. You're like, oh, well, we can do this for that and this over here for that and blah, blah, blah. No big deal. To you on paper, it probably looks beautiful and, it's going to work harmoniously and no big deal. But for a person that is not a practitioner, that this is not everyday information for, that could be really overwhelming. And so we need to start simple and we need to start low and go slow with things so that we can actually help people and we're not scaring them off or overwhelming them. And so then they just quit and walk away and you never hear from them again because they're overwhelmed. They're like, oh my God, that was way too much, too fast. So this episode is for both the patient and the practitioner, because I think it's important for us all to think about these things. And so again, just to wrap it up, we are going to be talking about the ones that everybody wants to know about. It's not just about the GLPs, but we're going to talk about those. But it's important that from this perspective of this episode, we understand the foundations and what we need to have in place, and maybe where we need to start looking. If we've already tried some things and haven't worked, then maybe we need to go back and reevaluate. Okay, well, where was my body? Where was my mind? Where was my inflammation status at this point when I tried this? oh, maybe it should have been supported in a different way before we went to the peptide. Or maybe my expectations were too big and too high and too wide. Maybe I just need to adjust my expectation and be a little bit more patient and understand that it's going to take time to heal this pathway, and that as it heals, the efficiency will get greater and better over time. Okay, I think that's a good place to stop, to leave you guys. I've given you a lot to think about and to digest. So thank you so much for hanging in there with me today. We will catch you in another Wellness Illuminated episode, probably in a couple of weeks, to start diving into some specifics about specific peptides, how they can help, what their role is. We'll probably even talk about where they are in the realm of the regulatory aspect, because of course, we all know that these compounds were very much demonized by the FDA, but RFK Jr. and the MAHA movement is really trying to right that ship. And I really hope they're able to do that, because these can be really helpful when you're working with an educated and qualified practitioner. So that's also really important. But our practitioners cannot work with these compounds if they're regulated to no man's land by the FDA. So again, another issue, we'll talk about it in context of each one, but progress is coming, and that's a good thing in the context of this conversation. So thank you everybody for joining me. We'll catch you in the next episode. As always, we have show notes, and if there was anything that I talked about that you want to go back and look at, then head on over to drlaramay.com/podcast. That's where all the show notes live, and we will catch you in the next episode. Thank you for joining me on Light Body Radio, where functional medicine meets intuitive healing and transformation happens on every level. If this episode resonated with you, please like, share, and if you're ready to go deeper, visit drlaramay.com to book a functional medicine consultation or an intuitive healing session. Whether you need to rebalance your body, clear your energetic blocks, or reconnect with your soul's purpose, I've got you. You can also follow me on Instagram or TikTok at Dr. Lara May for daily inspiration, energy updates, and healing tools. Remember, your healing is multidimensional, and so are you. Until next time, honor your body, trust your intuition, and activate your light.